I remember the day the house went quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes after thunder, the kind that presses on your chest until you can't breathe. My father's voice, the one steady thing in my life, was gone forever. The funeral was a blur of black suits, fake tears, and whispered gossip. I stood at the edge clutching my father's old watch, the only thing they hadn't snatched from my hand. My stepmother, Veronica, looked like she was born for tragedy. Black veil, red lipstick, crocodile tears. She clung to her children, my stepbrother Eric and stepsister Madison, as though they were grieving angels. But I knew better. I saw the flicker of satisfaction in Veronica's eyes every time someone offered condolences. I heard Madison's muffled giggle when she thought no one was listening. And Eric. Well, Eric was already on his phone, probably checking stock prices. Still, despite the circus, I had hope, because I knew the truth. My father had told me, late one night when his voice was weak, but his hand was firm around mine. No matter what happens, you'll be taken care of. I've made sure of it. Those words kept me standing. The will. 2 weeks later, I walked into the mahogany-paneled office of my father's lawyer, Mr. Alden. I wore the same black dress from the funeral. It was the only one I had left that fit. Veronica, Eric, and Madison were already there, lounging on the leather chairs, as if it were their living room. "Ah, the orphan arrives," Madison smirked, crossing her legs. Her diamond bracelet caught the light. She'd gotten it just days after the funeral. My stomach tightened. "Sit, Claire," Veronica said, her voice honeyed with poison. "Let's not drag this out." Mr. Alden cleared his throat and opened a thick envelope. His glasses slid down his nose as he read, "Upon my death, I, Richard Sinclair, leave the entirety of my estate, valued at $35 million, to my daughter, Claire Sinclair." The air shifted. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. 35 million. Safety, freedom. A life where I didn't have to flinch at every cruel word. But the silence that followed was dangerous. I could feel their eyes burning holes into me. "That can't be right," Veronica snapped. "It's quite clear, Mrs. Sinclair," Mr. Alden said. "The assets, the accounts, the properties, all belong to Claire." Eric leaned forward, smiling like a predator. "Well, congratulations, little sis. Guess you're the princess now." But his eyes told me he wasn't congratulating me at all. For the first time in my life, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was free. The first few days after the reading, I felt untouchable. They treated me with fake politeness, as though waiting for me to slip. I walked through the halls of the mansion, and for once, I didn't feel invisible, but the shift came fast. Veronica started planting seeds of doubt. "Sweetheart, handling money is difficult. You're too young. Let me guide you." Eric cornered me in the library. "Investments aren't a game. You'll lose it all if you don't let me manage it." Madison mocked me in subtle ways. "Don't worry, Claire. You can hire a stylist with all that money. God knows you need one. I tried to ignore them. My father's money was mine. My life was finally mine. Or so I thought. One rainy evening, Mr. Alden called me into his office again. His face looked pale, nervous. "Claire," he said, tapping a folder on his desk, "there have been complications, legal challenges." "What kind of challenges?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Your stepmother has produced alternate documentation, signatures, amendments. Claims that the assets were placed in a family trust, not directly to you. That's impossible. My father—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "But the courts will take months, maybe years to sort this out." I left the office shaking. Outside, Veronica's black car was waiting, Madison and Eric inside, smirking like cats who'd just eaten. The next weeks were a nightmare. The mansion locks were changed, My bank card stopped working. I couldn't access a cent. "You'll thank us later," Veronica said, her hand gripping my chin like a claw. "You're too fragile to handle real money. We're just protecting you. From yourself." She laughed as she shoved me out the front door with nothing but a torn suitcase. The rain poured that night, and I walked away barefoot, the gravel cutting into my feet. That was the night I stopped being their victim. That was the night I started being something else. The motel room became my cage. 4 walls, peeling wallpaper, a flickering neon light outside that buzzed all night like an angry hornet. At first I told myself it was temporary, that somehow the truth would come out, that the courts would fix everything. But weeks turned into months. My name was dragged through every newspaper, every gossip blog. The unstable Sinclair girl, they called me. The ungrateful heiress. My phone filled with messages from strangers. "You should be ashamed. You're nothing without them. Stop pretending to be something you're not." I stopped answering calls. Stopped looking at social media. Stopped being Claire Sinclair. At work, I scrubbed tables until my hands cracked. My manager barked at me for moving too slow. Customers snapped their fingers like I was invisible. I was no one. And sometimes, in the dead hours of the night, I believed it. But every time I started to sink into that abyss, I remembered Madison's smirk, Eric's laughter, Veronica's claws on my chin. Those memories kept me from drowning. Because rage is a strange thing. It can destroy you, or it can keep you alive. One night, after another 12-hour shift, I found myself at a thrift store, pawing through dusty shelves. My eyes fell on a leather-bound notebook, worn but sturdy. 50 cents. That notebook became my confessional, my weapon, my scripture. I filled it with every insult they ever threw at me, every cruel word, every injustice. Then, slowly, the pages shifted from pain to analysis. Veronica's weakness, vanity. She craved admiration, thrived on being seen as untouchable. Eric's weakness, greed. He gambled in secret, I remembered. A taste for risks. Madison's weakness, approval. She couldn't survive without attention, without someone telling her she was special. I dissected them like insects pinned to a board. Every detail went into that notebook. Every pattern. Every crack in their perfect armor had stolen, but a map to something greater. That night, in the dim glow of the motel lamp, something in me shifted. I wasn't the broken girl they thought I was. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't invisible. I was my father's daughter, and if they thought they had won, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The first wire transfer cleared on a rainy Tuesday. Just a few $1,000s from one of my father's offshore accounts, but it felt like a lifeline. Enough to pay the motel rent for a few weeks. Enough to buy new clothes that didn't reek of fryer grease. Enough to remind me that I wasn't helpless. But money alone wasn't revenge. Money was just a tool. What I needed was power. And my father had left me more than money. He'd left me connections. His name was Julian Hale. My father had spoken of him once, in hushed tones, as a man who made problems disappear, a fixer, a strategist, the kind of man Veronica hated, which meant I could trust him. I found him in a shabby office above a pawn shop. When I told him my name, his eyes widened. "Sinclair's girl," he murmured. "I thought they buried you along with him." "Not yet," I said, "but they tried." I showed him the paper from the watch, the accounts, the notes. He studied them, then looked at me with something like respect. "You know what you're asking for, don't you?" "Yes," I said. "I don't want justice. I want destruction." He leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Then you came to the right place." Julian taught me how to use information as a weapon. He showed me how to trace Veronica's new investments, how to track Madison's contracts, how to dig into Eric's financial records. And the cracks were everywhere. Veronica's charities were a front, money laundering dressed up as philanthropy. Madison's modeling career was a string of favors bought with Sinclair money, her portfolio paper thin. Eric was worse. His gambling wasn't a memory. It was a habit. High-stakes poker, underground betting. He was bleeding money and hiding it. They weren't untouchable. They were fragile. And I would be the hammer. Veronica's charities? Exposed in the press? Eric's gambling? I joined one of his games, made sure he lost. Madison? I baited her with a fake talent agency and watched her humiliation go viral. Piece by piece, they stumbled. Their empire no longer looked golden. It looked rotten. And I wasn't done. Revenge tastes sweetest when it's slow, when it's not one decisive blow, but 100 tiny cuts that bleed your enemy dry. By now, the Sinclairs were fractured beyond repair. But I didn't want them ruined too quickly. No, I wanted them to destroy each other. So I whispered. Anonymous messages, fake texts, carefully leaked documents. Eric accused Veronica of stealing from him. Madison screamed that Veronica never loved her. Veronica snapped, losing her cool in public. I watched from the shadows, savoring every crack. And then, my favorite moment. I invited them to a charity dinner, not theirs, mine. A new foundation I had built quietly, under another name. When they walked in, the crowd gasped. They looked disheveled, angry, small. And then I stepped onto the stage. Good evening, I said smoothly. My name is Claire Sinclair. And I'm honored you could all join me tonight. The cameras flashed. The whispers roared. Veronica's face went pale. Eric cursed. Madison looked ready to faint. I raised my glass. To family. The ones who build us up, and the ones who try to tear us down. They had to sit there, smiling for the cameras, while the world realized I wasn't buried. I was back. That night, I didn't just humiliation
win.
wasn't
I
enough.
humiliated
I wanted
them.
them broken. Eric was first. His debts spiraled out of control, his mugshot plastered everywhere. The golden boy turned fraud. Madison was next. Tricked by a fake Paris casting call, photographed crying alone on the street. The princess turned joke. And Veronica. The queen, the one who thought she'd won. I let her scramble, let her fight, and then I released everything, every forged signature, every bribe, every theft. She wasn't just ruined, she was hated. I wanted to see her break. So I met her at the mansion, the house that should have been mine. She sat at the table, pearls trembling on her neck. You think you've won? She hissed. You're still nothing. I slid the folder across the table. Court orders, asset freezes, foreclosures, everything gone. Back to me. Her hands shook as she opened it. Do you feel it now? I whispered. The way it crushes your chest? The way you can't breathe? That's what you gave me. And now, it's yours. Tears spilled down her face. She grabbed my hand. Please, Claire, don't take everything. I pulled away. You already did. Now it's my turn, and I walked out, leaving her in the ruins of her empire. The mansion was mine again. The accounts, the businesses, the name. But that wasn't what satisfied me. It was the silence. The silence of knowing they could no longer laugh at me. The silence of knowing I'd carved my place back with my own hands. The silence of victory. I paused in my father's study, his old chair facing the window. For a moment, I could almost hear his voice. No matter what happens, you'll be taken care of. And I was. Not because of the money. Not because of the mansion, but because I had inherited something greater. His brilliance, his fire, his will to fight. And now I wasn't just the girl they tried to bury. I was the storm they never saw coming.